And by the way, there is a parent council, an advocacy council in every region in the state. So if anybody's interested in getting involved, because that's where your voice can be heard, you can reach out to, you can look it up on OPWDD, you can reach out to me, and I can direct you to, the representative in your area.
So welcome back to Finding Common Ground with Heather and Steve. Today we have Dawn O'Hara. She is a mom of 2 children that are adults. They have disabilities. We're going to let her dive into explaining that part and what she's done to make a difference in the disability community. So thank you, Dawn. I'm so glad that you could be here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah. And Steve
Nice
had
to have
made
you.
the connection. So how do you guys know each other?
We actually met through the Family Support Services, FSS Advisory Council through Central New York. And we've been collaborating since meeting about a year ago, and it's been extraordinary.
Wonderful. Why don't you explain what FSS is? And I know it sounds really simple to everybody who's listening. We're coming out of the state of New York, so this is a New York State program, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's all state dollars. So any changes with federal funding and things aren't supposed to impact FSS, and it's supposed to be funding that's open to anybody with a disability. If I'm wrong, just tell me. But that's my understanding, and I know that it's been getting increasingly difficult to actually access these funds. And that's why these advisory councils have kind of popped up and regained some strength so we can raise up our voices and make sure that the things that we have set aside for us, we can actually access. Did I get that kind of right?
Yes.
Good.
So the Family Support Services program is a small piece of the services that the state provides, and you do not need to go through the front door, have waiver services to access family support services. Now, it is a much smaller program, but it can provide services such as family reimbursement for eligible items that are purchased. There are different programs. As an example, I was very, very blessed today to be out on a site visit at a rec program in Syracuse and just watch the children having so much fun at a summer camp, basically. So recreational services, there are some areas that provide transportation to those. And, it's just those kind of services that may be accessed through family support services.
Okay, so let's do an example. I'm going way back in my brain that when Devin was first diagnosed with seizures, and then we realized that sometimes a food was an actual trigger, then we had to go to this really pretty intense medical diet for a little while where we ruled things out, and it had like kind of specialty items that we had to order, like powdered eggs. I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, and if you go to a camping store, you might be able to find them, but way back then, powdered eggs were not really easy to find, and they were super, super expensive. And I believe we would get those reimbursed for us because they were directly related to her disability. They helped her stay healthy and safe at home. But over the years, it got harder and harder for us to find, and I don't know what to call them. They're not vendors, are they? They're nonprofit agencies or organizations. Different people are kind of allowed to dole it out based on the criteria. I'm probably not explaining this in the best way, but it's the way I know it. And I think a lot of parents who hear me tell that story will be like, yeah, I kind of know what she's talking about. I think we did that for this or for that. And then I just stopped trying, if I'm being honest, because it just became such a production. I had to, pay for it up front, and then I had to get the receipt. And then half the time they said, oh, we're out of money. Or, for whatever reason, you can't get it this time. And I think some parents probably fell into that same loop. What would you say it's like right now?
Well, it's in the process of a major change, quite honestly. So as an example, the family reimbursement piece of the FSS program, there is up to a $3,000 eligibility reimbursement. However, the list has just come out, and I have to check about the powdered eggs. I'm not sure because there is a very specific list that you can find on the OPWDD website through FSS where eligible items versus non-eligible items, and that is changing. And that list literally just came out last month.
Oh, okay.
So there are a lot of things in change right now, but that program is out there, and that's a program that's really being underutilized. So there is money available right now, and especially in the central New York area, that parents, I believe, as you were talking about, maybe got discouraged over in the past or just don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. I hope that, they've tuned in and then they get to hear, oh, I'm going to try that. I'm going to find out. So if they talk to their care manager, or you don't have to go through your self-direction broker, then it doesn't sound like.
Not necessarily. There's a lot of information on the website, but it would probably be a good idea to take that avenue, because the care directors a lot of times can direct them specifically, because it is still buy it, get reimbursed.
Right,
but
right.
The procedures, the procedure hasn't changed, but the allowance has, and the allowables and the non-allowables have also.
That's great. So I'm going to ask a personal question, because my
Sure.
daughter is non-speaking and she goes to spelling lessons, and sometimes they're in a group and they're at a local nonprofit that I work at called Autism Up. And I can't get self-direction to pay for that because it's therapeutic. It looks like speech therapy, even though it's not speech therapy. I don't know if FSS is something that I could look at. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out there because I ask everybody how we can help more families use this method of communication, and it can be expensive if you don't have some kind of funding source.
Absolutely, and it definitely is something to explore. FSS will reimburse for certain equipment that's needed,
Mm-hmm.
and certain staffing. And again, this new list just came out, but if I were you, I would contact either the representative. I can check it out for you, and we can find out whether or
That'd
not
be
that's
great.
a reimbursable expense.
Well, thank you. And then, since I'm talking about one of my children, my daughter Devin, I don't know, would you be comfortable sharing a little bit about your sons and a little bit of their story?
Absolutely, a son and a daughter.
Okay.
So my story is different than a lot of other people. I actually moved here from Pennsylvania in 2010, and I'm gonna kind of put this in my 40 years of story in about 5 minutes. I grew up in a small farm right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, rural area, and got married right out of high school. My husband and I had 4 children. 2 of them have disabilities. And at the time, my son was diagnosed at a very early age. First, we thought he was deaf. Then it was just straight MR, because there were no political, labels or anything at the time. And my daughter, because there was no autism spectrum or anything like that, was PDD, pervasive developmental disability. We literally went through early education. They went to a private special education school. They went through supported job employment through their early 20s. And in 1996, my husband died unexpectedly. So I went from being a mom and a household supporter, and I had a little fledgling real estate business going on the side part-time, to being the breadwinner. And for the next 19 years, I was a single mom raising not only those 2, but my other 2 girls. And for the single parents out there in particular, it is so difficult, because when it's hard enough doing it as a couple, but when you're doing it alone, it's like, it was totally unexpected for me. And it was totally so difficult. The other thing I really would want to say is whether you're a couple or single parent, that I learned, and I carried this throughout my whole life, was a Pennsylvania educator said to me one time, you are your child's biggest advocate and loudest voice, and you need to use it. And so I really highly encourage everyone to just take that in because it's so true. So in 2010, I met my husband, my new husband. He had just lost his wife to cancer, and we decided to change our lives. Now, I will tell you, my youngest one was in college. My oldest one was already out of the house. And my two children, Dominic and Kendall, I just thought they would live with me for the rest of my life. I really did. I didn't even have a concept that they would live anyplace else. So we packed them up and we bought a little place here in the beautiful Finger Lakes, and we set up camp on a farm. They hated it. They absolutely hated it. And number one, it was like farming was not for them. And we were so isolated because it was such a different cultural environment. Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, in my naivete, I never dreamed that I would have difficulty getting them into the New York State system. Oh. I mean, I had boxes and boxes and boxes of paperwork and files, and they had received every benefit, every program, service that I could get my hands on in Pennsylvania. And in fact, when I came to New York and I started this process in early 2011, the local, because we don't have a lot of services here in the rural, there's a lot of pockets in rural New York where it's a very limited choice. But they just started providing services because they admit both my children, and they just I said, they need to support a job, they need this, and they just started providing. And then for my daughter on the autism spectrum, the door got slammed in her face. Oh. I got a call out of the blue, like 4 months into services, and we were moving, and said, sorry, she's been denied. And oh my gosh, we have a problem here because we've been providing services, not realizing that she would be denied.
Wow.
I was so shocked. I was so shocked. I didn't even know what to do. That went into a 3-year, and there's no other word for it but a battle. I hired attorneys. I fought this decision for 3 years. And she's one of the young adults who, and I know there's thousands and thousands that are falling through the cracks. And she's one of those.
And that is that right there is such a good, important place to pause just for a second, because it's amazing to me that you were in a neighboring state. And people often think of New York as very progressive, and that we have, we were a leader in disability rights for so long, that you were actually approved for less here. That we had to take a moment to digest that, because that would have shocked me too. I would have assumed, moving just from a neighboring state into New York, that you wouldn't have been up against that. That had to be really rattling, and you knew she needed it. This wasn't like a brand new thing, and you're like, I hope this helps. Like you had already been in the trenches, you had already seen it, and you probably knew what happened when she didn't have the supports that she needed. So I'm so sorry to hear that. That's what was their reasoning? Like, if you don't mind me asking.
Well, it's interesting because it was just such a fine line, and over, and we went to appeal after appeal after appeal. And even the providers were saying, we don't understand what's going on. But it was a fine line of IQ. And she would test in adaptability versus her IQ level, and she was right on the borderline. Like, they'd test her 1 week and she'd be right 1 point below, and then she'd be a couple weeks later 1 point above. And that was it. That was literally, or the way it was explained to me at the time. Now, here's the really frustrating part. My son, in the meantime, was getting services, and he's just kind of a happy-go-lucky guy. He doesn't say much, and he just goes along with anything, and everything just kind of, he's like Teflon. Everything bounces off of him. And I kept saying to everybody I was talking to, even to the judge, I was like, my daughter could be the poster child for the success of New York State services if you give them to her.
Right.
I mean, she could have benefited so much more than my son did. And, I mean, it was just amazing to me. However, she does not receive services today. She's basically supported by us, and that's been quite a long journey. And so that was a battle. That was a shock. And we went through that for over 3 years before we just decided we're not going to get anywhere with this.
Mm-hmm.
And we just decided to take our own avenue. In the meantime, my son, Dominic, he was getting all the services, and he's just kind of going on with like he always does. A requirement for my household, and this was just me being a hardworking single mom my whole life, was that you need a job. And I don't care if you go 10 hours, 5, 10, 20 hours a week. And we have no transportation here. So we were spending 2 hours a day transporting both of them to our nearest town, because there really are no jobs right here. We're in a farming community. So that was a lot of time on our end too. And that's a huge issue in a lot of these more rural areas, is transportation and access to services.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line is, the services for my son didn't particularly work for him. And they got to a point about 5 years in where they didn't want to live with us anymore, both of them. My daughter got very depressed. In fact, I found out later that she was contemplating suicide.
Oh my goodness.
Which I didn't even know, because they just felt very isolated. We had taken them away from their friends, the place they knew, to literally an unknown. We had no family, no friends here. And for us, we were just like, okay. And it never even occurred to me that would affect them.
Mm-hmm. And I found with people with autism that too, they kind of romanticize the beginning of their life, no matter what it was. It's like that first home or the first friend, it makes such an impression on them. And even if they have wonderful things that happen afterwards, that old memory is still their core memory. So I could see how you wouldn't have saw that coming, but that had to be hard, because you have the mama guilt going on, and you want them to be happy. And it is a natural milestone to move out. So, mm-hmm.
Well, and for me too, because in my world, in my head, I had always thought that these two would live with us. In fact, when my husband Jerry and I, got married, and he was, carrying all this baggage, all of my baggage, I said to him, I made it very clear. I was like, Dominic and Kendall are going to be with us for the rest of their lives, and he accepted that. But they kind of made the decision that they didn't like this lifestyle. They wanted to move on. Mm-hmm. And so we started that search of finding residential placement for both of them. Now, for Kendall, because she wasn't getting any services, for me, that was a lot harder for me to disassociate. Now, and I will say, she got the benefit of services because we did have staff members coming to our house to teach cooking skills and other skills to Dominic. And then they would because the local agencies didn't understand it either. They knew both kids, so she kind of got the benefit of the, just the observation.
Good. Yeah.
But ultimately what happened was Dominic went to a supported apartment with another roommate in our city that's nearby in Auburn. And then we found an apartment for Kendall a few blocks away from where he was. And so I'm kind of a tiger mama. I am a supervisor, and I was keeping a pretty good close eye on both of them. And the supported apartment did not work well for Dominic. He was because it was semi-supported. They were living alone, and then the staff would just come in maybe once a day or, every couple of days and just check on them. And for my son, that did not work out. He was not capable of independent living. or
Mm-hmm.
even semi-independent living. And it culminated over issues with the roommate, but ultimately, when he was walking to work or to the day hab one morning to get his ride to go to work, he got hit by a car.
Oh no.
And so that was the point where I said, no, no, that, this is not going to work. And there were many, many issues that he was just not capable of dealing with.
And sometimes
In
it's
the
like
mean,
that you can train somebody how to cook and how to clean and have clothes, and be ready and how often you should shower. But those little things, those moments of, with the car, and things like that, it doesn't matter how much you've gone over all the basics. Things pop up in life that you can't teach somebody what to do when they happen. I know as my sister also has autism, and as an adult, she still comes across things that just we're like, oh yeah, like that's totally novel to you. You're not able to generalize what you already know to that situation, and that's tough. That's why some people do need a little more support and more consistent.
and that's absolutely right. The bottom line is it wasn't anybody's fault. It was his fault. He was late and he wasn't paying attention, and the car didn't hit him. He hit the car. He like ran smack into the car.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but still, it was like a cumulative amount of things that had happened that made us realize it's like, no, this situation is not
That could have
working
been
for
much
him.
worse, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the meantime, my Kendall, she's in her apartment. She's learning how public transportation. She had a job, that business closed, and then she got a job at Walmart. Now, Walmart has been fantastic to her. She's been working there for 7 years.
Oh, great.
And so she has pretty much, and there was a lot of support in the beginning, of course. And she does have a job coach through, I think it's called OVR here, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. So that's been a great resource for us. And she does get job coaching services, but by now she knows her job there so well, she doesn't really need a coach anymore. But again, it is very, my experience with my daughter with autism is change is difficult, but once she gets the routine down, she does that exact routine to verbatim, to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
And so she does have the local bus transportation. Walmart's only about 2 miles from where she lives, but she does still need, her social skills. She has
Mm-hmm.
none, and she has no friends. And now it's been 7 years since she's had this apartment, and landlord's been fantastic. She knows I'm a phone call away. She can, but still, she eats out most of the time. Her cooking skills are almost non-existent.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So there are things that I would love to see improvement. And she knows we have a weekly coaching session, by the way. I have a coaching session either in person or online Zoom with her every week. And we literally go over the things that she wants to work on, her goals and the things that I feel that she needs to work on.
I love that. Like just making it part of your schedule, like build it in, because sometimes we just get busy and we don't even think about those things until there's a crisis. That's really cool.
And she really needs that too, because she's really, now that she's independent, she loves her independence, and her biggest fear is losing her job, losing her apartment, and having to come back to live with us. That would be like the fate worse than death to her.
Right. Well, because she'd go backwards, and in her mind and her black and white thinking, she's on her own, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So, yeah, I get it.
Yes. But this has been a long, long journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so for my son, and I don't know if anyone out there has heard of this, but when we were in Pennsylvania, Dominic worked a day program at an organization called Camp Hill Village in Kimberton in Pennsylvania. And it was a dairy farm, and he enjoyed it. And he only worked there 4 hours a day, but we had transportation. They would come pick him up, take him there, come back. It was in a neighboring county. And so their United States facility is in the eastern part of New York. And we had looked at them right away when we moved up here, and we all said no. They were an aging out community. I wasn't ready to let go of my children. Literally, it was just like a no. After the incident with the apartment, and he came back, and again, he didn't want to come back to the farm and live here. So it was almost serendipity that they had reached out to us and said, "Listen, we've revamped. We've we have a younger community now, and would he be interested in relooking?" And so after about a 2-year period, that's where he's living.
Oh,
And
good.
it's a beautiful community. He will, and so he will live there for life.
Is it
And
considered an intentional community? Because I've seen some information on it. It's Camp Hill, you're saying, right?
Camp Hill Village, yes,
Yep.
it's actually it's founded in Europe, and so they are all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it literally between our reluctance and then the process to go through it, it was a 10-year period.
Oh,
But
wow.
that is where he lives now, and it's working well. And the beauty of that environment for him is the fact that he has a girlfriend. He's living an adult life. He has a job. He has a purpose. And I think for every human on this planet, they need a purpose.
Absolutely. So many people are just isolated at home. If they don't have transportation somewhere or they're on a wait list to get into a program, then they're just sitting at home, sitting on the couch. Steve, I'm gonna ask you to be vulnerable for a minute. You've been super quiet. This is your turn. No. You ready? So
I'm listening.
as she was talking, and I know that your son lives with you and he has an apartment and it's working out really well. How would you feel if one day he's like, I think I'm ready to move out? Because that's not in your mind what's going to happen. And it really might not happen with your son. But I just wanted you to kind of walk through what that would be like, because it is unsettling when you think this is what we're doing and this is, this is the plan. And then your kid changes the plan. So,
Yeah, Dustin we built an apartment in the cellar. We were originally told by OPWDD they were going to chip in all kinds of money. And as anybody knows that has familiarity with the systems way back, it never happened. I mean, the total they promised kept getting lower until it got to zero.
oh, wow.
So we wound up doing it ourselves. We put a 2-bedroom apartment in for him. We didn't put a stove for safety reasons. We put a microwave. We put refrigerator, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's got his own. He's got a better bathroom. We have 4 bathrooms in our house. He's got the best bathroom in the house. A sit down
Good for
shower,
him.
everything. But having said that, he has no interest in leaving this house under any circumstances. We've actually talked at times about relocating. He's dead set against it. He gets that familiarity, and I think it goes back to Don, your children in Pennsylvania, where that's where they're comfortable, that's where they want to be, and anything else out of the realm, doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
for him. So I don't know what's going to happen. I have my daughters are in this line of guardianship all the way down. His life would change if he moved, and I don't know if he'd be happier actually with his sisters who love him, but they have little kids and they have
Mm-hmm.
active lives. And my son is he's 35. He's not gonna. I don't know if he wants to hang around with 9-year-olds
Yeah.
and 4-year-olds and all that kind of stuff. And so that part of it we have to address. We haven't yet because he has a place here and we have everything set up with the guardianship. But I can see him getting into a place like Calvin has housing here in the Utica
Mm-hmm.
area of something like that for autism, having maybe a roommate. I don't think he can live on his own, even at his age. Like you mentioned, some of the things you mentioned, he's come a long ways, but there's safety issues. I mean, he's put microwave in, or I'm sorry, aluminum foil in a microwave to cover
Oops.
something, you, and you can't do that. Those
Yeah,
kinds of
no, that's
things.
not a great idea, but he learned, I hope. I know.
Yeah, he learned. But look, that Camp Hill you're talking about, I've actually heard from. I know of it because I have several friends that have had kids there, and they love the program there. I think it would be a great thing to model and other parts of it. It's unfortunate. I don't know if we have anything like that in New York, as close to it as that, but I think
Well,
there's my son would go to there. He would
yeah,
go
I was
there.
going to say the locations that are up and running have been grandfathered in because there's a settings rule, and that says that you can't have a lot of people with disabilities living in the same place, or it's considered an institution. But Camp Hill is gone under scrutiny. I mean, people have looked at it,
Yes.
they've analyzed it, and they said it's the choice that they made. You know, they weren't forced into this. It wasn't the only option. And if they can do it, like I always say, like, because that is one of the models that people, they'll say, like, when I'm talking about intentional communities or building up, you know, smart homes and really thinking about like bringing people together who have similar needs and wants and interests. Why wouldn't you want to have a neighbor that's like you? Right? I mean, we don't want to go and be in a situation where everything is different or not comfortable. So I really do hope that the settings rule, there's a lot of buzz about it right now. It came out of Willowbrook because it was a good intention, right? We don't want to just clump everybody together with a disability because the ratios might not be right and it might turn into neglect or abuse. And let's be honest, that could happen anywhere, right? I mean, that doesn't just happen in a community. So I love hearing about the examples that work because sometimes people, the powers that be, get stuck on the things that could go wrong instead of looking at the things that have gone right.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, I'm going to echo what you just said. If you've never had a chance to visit Camp Hill Village, USA in Copake, New York, it is like magic on earth. Oh. And I can't say beyond. I'm trying to get a clip. A New York City filmmaker had done a documentary on Camp Hill, and it is just the most amazing piece. But everybody is happy there.
Oh,
like it's a place
goodness.
where everybody is smiling. They have they know what they know what they're supposed to do during the day. It's very scheduled. They fit. The beauty is like I said, my son he's just kind of like whatever until it doesn't work.
Right.
And
yeah.
they literally fit the person to the job, the person to the home, and not the other way around.
Oh, I love that.
And it really is. And he is so happy right now. And like I said, he has a girlfriend, and they're like this. Mm-hmm. And it's just a beautiful place. When there is conflict, they have staff right on hand, and I think there's maybe about 10 houses there now. And these houses are beautiful, by the way. He lives in a nicer house than I live in. So it's like the physical environment is beautiful. And, but they literally address everything immediately. Like the minute there is any conflict within a household, if the house parents cannot address it, the administration comes in and addresses it right away.
I have to know what the funding stream is for this, okay? Because this sounds wonderful, and then you think about the alternatives and how hard it is. So how do they get money for this? Is this a private pay option? Is this a combination of having a subsidy? Like how does this work? You gotta break this down for us.
So it's interesting that you asked that question because there's a similar Camp Hill, because they have them around. They're mostly in the Northeast, but they have a similar one in Pennsylvania. And I tried to get both of my children into Sultane in Pennsylvania, and that's privately funded, and I just could not afford it. So that's why he went to the day program that was in the neighboring community, and they offered these job services on the farm. Mm-hmm. In New York, it's different. So it's a combination of state funding and subsidiary. And remember, this is a worldwide organization. They're in multiple countries. So they have very strong donor. They're always running, foundation donations. And they also pull, which is another amazing thing, they pull most of their staffing from Europe.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and it's such a it's such a fun, beautiful collaboration, because what happens is and I don't think most Americans know this, but in Europe, when kids graduate from high school, and I know it's called something different, before they can go to university, they have to take a year off, and they either have to work, and depends on what country you're in, they either have to work in civil service or go into the military. And so their pull from whatever country, and there are kids from all over Europe and Asia and the continent of Africa, who come for a year on a visa, and they'll do their civil service year here in the United States.
Wow, that's way different than our high
so
schools that do, the 20 hours of volunteer work before you graduate. So, wow.
So it's a very, and I think one of the criteria is you have to know how to speak English, obviously, but the staffing and the culture is worldwide.
Right.
And very accepting. So I would just really suggest, they have these public days. They just had an opening day in May, and they're open to the public during the week on certain days, because they have a bakery, they have a coffee shop, they sell their products and their goods. And if you ever have a chance, just take a walk, take a tour. They have the most amazing herb garden that I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, and that global perspective and the cultural piece, it's interesting. I've worked in education and healthcare, and now I'm in the nonprofit arena. And one-on-one staff, or when you're in the medical model, like a CNA, there's a culture to that. It's not, it probably differs from region to region, and I don't want to overgeneralize. But bringing people in with a different perspective that don't see it that way would be very interesting, because we have a really hard time at this point changing the culture in a certified group home. The DSPs don't feel valued. They feel like, they're second-class citizens in some regards. They don't have much control over their schedule. They're working insane hours. And it comes out on the people, right? I mean, the people they're supposed to serve are not getting the best version of the people who signed up to serve them, but don't really love the atmosphere. And then how do you change it? I think I am going to visit. I've heard about it a bunch of times, but I haven't ever given it much thought afterwards. But now I would really love to see how they set it up and what the training is like for their caregivers. Are they called caregivers, or do they have a name that they go by? I'm sure they don't call them DSPs.
No,
I just have this feeling.
No. So the people people who live there, who receive the services, are the villagers, and
I love that.
And they're a house parent, and they're house parents, and then the rest of the staff, I'm not sure what they're called. They're just called by their name.
How beautiful is that? How beautiful is that? I mean, we are people, right? We're
Yes.
community members. And when you don't have a title, I have found, then you feel more like equals instead of I'm in charge of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the house parents are families. Like, there are a lot of children that live there with their parents who are who are overseeing a house.
Well, here,
so
Steve, that's your retirement plan right there.
It is a community. It's a true community. That's basically Camp Hill in a nutshell. In the meantime, though, here's the thing, and I just know this because I was with an agency today at this site visit, and staffing in New York State has become such a problem. Mm-hmm. Agencies, that's one of the issues we're having a problem with, or agencies are having a problem with, is finding qualified staff. So I love what you said when you said, let's use this as a model, because that's exactly how I feel. I was like, New York State, you have a perfect model here on how to set up residential communities. And they don't have to be isolated. Camp Hill is not isolated. They go out and do all kinds of stuff out into community. They're only a half hour from Albany.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it doesn't have to be institutionalized. And it's funny when you mentioned Willowbrook, where I came from, our version of Willowbrook was Pennhurst. And when they closed Pennhurst, they literally, majority of the patients at Pennhurst got put out on the street into my small rural town where I lived. And that created such a problem that took years and years and years to address.
Right. Sometimes we make a policy and a plan and we never talk to the people. Like, what is going to help you when we do this? Because maybe you should close down that big, ugly building where there's not enough staff, but where will the people go? It's like we fast forward sometimes in government. We see an issue, we want to cut the funding, we want to save money here. And I'm guessing it ends up costing more because now they're on the street, they're in the emergency rooms, they're taking up places at shelters if you have them, and that's no good either. And they're human lives, that. Are you guys comfortable just diving in a little bit, because it's still not all perfectly clear with the big beautiful bill. So the federal reforms to Medicaid, because as you're talking, it says, in my mind, I'm thinking, never let a good crisis go to waste, because right now, New York State has some really hard decisions. If funding is shifted, they don't have to take it out on the disability community. There's exemptions. The way the law is written, they don't have to. And they're going to be open to ideas that they've never been open to before because there's less money. They have to do things differently. Am I the only person that feels that way? Like, I'm really trying, I'm a silver lining person by nature, but I also think that for all the things that scare people about this new way of funding, there are these hidden opportunities. And I think this is one of them. I mean, if Camp Hill works, this is the time we probably push for it because we don't have a lot of other choices. My 2 cents. I don't know.
And quite honestly, there are other ways of funding. There really are other ways of funding. Steve, I'm going to let you, because we just had this a brief conversation the other night.
I was hoping it would kind of go here, because sometimes we really get tied into, I don't want to lose my subsidy, I need this, and
right.
So thank you for bringing that up, because that's so important for our audience to just break out of that box and out of that thinking and say, what if I didn't have OPWDD at all? What if, like your daughter, she never got through the front door? What do you do then? What are the other ways to fund things?
Well, and we just had this conversation the other night, and the thing I think I really want to just put out there is a tremendous amount of fear out there right now. And even my daughter, where she works, she hears it at her job. Mm-hmm. She hears it on the floor. She hears it from the employees. So yes, and everybody is really, really nervous about what's going to happen in regards to this bill. And we don't know. That's the thing. We just don't know what's going to happen. So Steve, would you like to address what maybe we were talking about the other night and the response we got?
Heather's heard me respond to this kind of stuff. Probably half the support groups.
But it's good to, I think it's a perfect time. There's a lot of people worried.
Yeah, look, half the support groups I'm in and across the state have delved into this, and their heads are exploding and their fear. I'm not naive to think that there shouldn't be. I just refuse to go down those roads. The things that we're doing have not required any state funding whatsoever. The initiatives that we're doing right now haven't cost anybody anything other than somebody chipping in. And you mentioned other supports for money. We raised $170,000 at our gala for the Complex Care Rec Center. We're doing some other stuff coming up. We're not expecting to ask the state for any money to start the housing stuff that we're going to do in Utica. We got the bus. I got the veterans to buy the bus. $11,000. We didn't ask OPWDD for anything. My point being is, if OPW, like you mentioned, Heather, did not exist, and say it was 100 years ago, what would families do? They'd find a solution and fix it. And no matter what no matter what road you had to go down, you're going to find a way to do whatever's best for your kids. And when I talk to so many people and I try to inspire them and empower them to try and do something themselves, because, and we've mentioned it on here in other podcasts, the cavalry's not coming. The federal cuts, I could care less, and I shouldn't say that, but I don't, because everything is pretty much state anyways, or local. And I know that, a lot of this gets into the politics, which I stay out of, but all this fear mongering going on, I just don't know if it's beneficial. The families already feel hopeless. So what do? Let's make them more hopeless.
Right, right. That's so political, though, right? Because if we make it this big bad bill, then we can be mad at somebody. And then if New York State somehow saves us, then they're they protected us, and then we vote for them. I feel like there's a little bit of this political theater going on where, we're building it up more than we need to. So we look really impressive when we fix it.
Right. There's a lot of things people can do. There's, Dawn, you went back to the single mom. I was a single dad with 3 kids back then. There's so many single moms, and their voices aren't being heard. And they aren't, even to this day, that's not something that just happened politically in the last year. The voices weren't being heard 10 years ago. The voices, of single moms, single dads, or whatever. And it just tells me that we go back to what you said in the beginning, Heather, with the culture, that has to change. And I think timing is everything in life. And I think we're in a perfect time to get, sunshine out of all this rain, so to speak, that's going on. And that's by doing things differently. And, Dawn, you had a chance to meet Willow in person. There's just a lot of things that we can do, I think, as family members, that for the first time probably, to make change ourselves, and then bring in those supports from OPWDD and all that kind of stuff afterwards. But I'm not going. All the people I advocate for, including all these kids in my house right now. I think there's 4 upstairs right now, that we have to find a future for them. They're a lot younger than I am. And so I have to make sure they're going to be set, and I'm going to find a way. And I think it's important that families realize that they're not alone, that we are all in this together. We got to find a way to get community involved, local involved, and stuff like that. Because you know what, if I wanted to do yet another new initiative, and I got some things going in my head all the time, I'm going to go I'm going to go find a way to do it. I'm going to go open those doors, and I'm not going to call, the White House or Albany and say, "What can you do for me?" I'm going to go do it, and then hope that I can bring the supports back in around the initiatives that we are already working on. You know what happens? Because now, when we already started a lot of these projects, like in our area, now they're coming to us.
Exactly, because you found a solution. Right.
So that was enough.
I agree. No, but it's perfect, because when we are pressed, when our budget is smaller, we can't do the crazy frivolous things. We can't do it anymore. We have to really rethink how we're doing things. And when I bring up the frontline leadership model to OPW, I see them cringe. Their shoulders go up, their neck goes down. They're like turtling, like right in front of me. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, Dawn, but Pepsi uses it, the Marriott uses it, Trader Joe's. It's where no matter what your job title is, no matter how long you've been with that business, that company, that corporation, that entity, you have at least 1 shift a week with the frontline staff. You have your boots on the ground, you're in the trenches. It immediately alleviates workforce shortages, because the people on top have to come down. What does it also do? They see it. They experience it. They see the inefficiencies, and then when they go back to their desk, they can write the new policy. They can change a rule. They can change the funding stream, because they're living it, just like the people on the front line. When there's too much disconnect, when the people on top have no idea what's happening on the bottom, there's no way that's going to be fair. We have way too many people collecting big checks and that are just sitting behind a desk. And I mean that in the most loving way. I've had desk jobs. I understand the importance of the paperwork, but people have to come first. And if there are people in crisis because we don't have enough staff, then you have to stand up from behind the desk and go to the people. That's our first priority. And that's a major shift in mindset. But the companies that do that, their inefficiencies go away because the people who can make the change are right there. They don't want to get mandated 3 days in a row. They're going to figure that out. So that's always the one I go to because nobody has to lose their job or their salary or put their pension at risk. But we immediately change the dynamics. And I think that I don't know how we get anybody to consider it, but I'm going to talk about it till I can't talk about it anymore. So.
Well, I would just, to add to that, something that I said at the very beginning, that again, I was working with state educators when my children were young in Pennsylvania because there were no laws for early school education and preschool, and I didn't know what to do as a parent. And when this state educator said to me, "You are your children's strongest advocate and you are their loudest voice," because neither one of them could talk at the time. Mm-hmm. And they weren't 1 year old. They were 4 and 6 years old. But that stuck with me my whole life, literally. And I think that we have to get back into a culture of being more proactive. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, any government, whether it's Pennsylvania, New York, or probably most of them, what I've found is those people at the top, and I think they all have good intentions. Mm-hmm. But when it is such a disconnect, what looks fantastic on paper, usually life is not going to go by what that plan is. Right, I mean, that just seems to be what happens. It's like, it can look great on paper, but when it's put into practice or actuality and all of the things come into place that nobody thought about, then that's where the dysfunction happens.
And that's where they should do a little rollout in one region. Let's try this here. Let's see if this works before they're like, the entire state is going to do it this way. I'm always like, oh no, that is, how do you know? Like, trial that, please. Benchmark with somebody else, please. Let's study it for a little bit. So I completely agree with that.
And quite honestly, for my daughter, since I've gotten so involved, with family support services, parent council. And by the way, there is a parent council, an advocacy council in every region in the state. So if anybody's interested in getting involved, because that's where your voice can be heard, you can reach out to, you can look it up on OPWDD, you can reach out to me, and I can direct you to, the representative in your area. It's been suggested to me that I try to get my daughter back through the front door again, because it has been 12 years or 13 years since we went through that process. And we've decided not to, for a couple different reasons. Because number one, and by the way, she lost her Social Security benefits.
Oh my goodness. Because made too much money at Walmart.
So, yes. And well, no, it was hours, minimum wage, when the $15 an hour minimum wage came up. And this happened to, again, thousands and thousands of people, so she's literally at the poverty level of the population just existing right now. So like Steve said, it's just like, she's the one I worry about when I'm no longer here. Like her future is what I really worry about. However, when we looked at the long term of her options, I said to her, in 20, 30, 40 years, Social Security might not even be here.
Right.
The services might not be available.
It's better to make as much money as you can, right?
Well,
instead
and not
of
only
asking
that,
for it, right?
Learning how to fish. It is that old adage. It's, do you feed, or do you teach them how to fish? Right. And she is learning self-sufficiency. And that's right beautiful. Now I'm trying to put everything in place for her that she knows, because again, like Steve said, she has family, she has siblings. First of all, she would never want to go live with her siblings ever. Again, that'd be like coming home to us. But the bigger question is they have their own lives, they have their own children, and that's a huge burden to put on somebody else who really was not part of bringing them into,
Right,
into
right.
this world. So I know, and I've talked to so many other parents, Steve, as you have as well, I know heard that is one of the biggest fear of a parent is what's going to happen to our kids if something happens to us.
Right, right. And I think
there's no
the
answer to
idea of
that.
that self-sufficiency is so important. And we've done something wrong along the way. We had all these supports and it's been wonderful in some ways, but in other ways, why are 90% of people with IDD underemployed? I mean, even the people who could possibly do that 20 hours a week that's in the new legislation, being engaged in your community, either volunteering or working for 20 hours a week and 80 hours minimum a month. Lots of people are so scared. I'm like, number one, our kids are exempt. Number two, what if they weren't? Like, what if we looked at it differently and we said, okay, yes. OPW, okay, now they have to work 20 hours a week. What are we going to do to help them work 20 hours a week rather than say, they can't work, they can't do it? Like, lots of parents are in that, and like that phase where they feel like they have to hold on to the benefits instead of pushing their child forward. If that benefit check is actually holding them back, we have to rethink some things. And I think this is the moment. We don't really have a choice in a lot of ways. So let's be innovative. Let's be creative. And instead of blaming somebody based on what political party they subscribe to, let's work together because we're all in this at this point. It passed, guys. The ship has sailed. It's in effect. Each state gets to decide what they're going to do. So if we want to talk about advocating, that's where the advocacy needs to be at the state level with your local officials, your elected people that you put into office. Get into their offices and talk to them now. They're going to be back in September and trying to figure this out, and they need to have a plan. So don't think you can sit back and wait and see what happens, because this is actually the pivotal time. And I would encourage people as we close out the show today to really think about who they could reach out, who in their local area has a voice, who's on that disability committee. When you look at the Assembly and the Senate, who can you make a relationship with? And so they have an idea when they have to decide what gets trimmed and what gets maintained, that our faces are in their mind and our stories are in their hearts, because that's how we protect what we need and push for the innovation that basically we haven't been allowed to do. That's my little soapbox right there. I'm trying because I know people are scared. So I want to thank you for coming today, for letting us know a little bit about your own personal story and those little, surprises that come along the way that you just don't expect, but they grow you. You learn more. Every little turn, brings you to a different place. And it was really great getting to know you. And I love the idea with FSS. Join one of the councils. Be part of a community with other parents that are like you or have faced challenges. You feel less alone. You're also networking with people who can change things. You're going to meetings and you're having, influence on policies and regulations, and it just gets your foot in the door. It gets you around other people who want to do good things. And I highly encourage it. Thank you
Dawn,
again.
thanks for coming on, Dawn. And look, what we like to do the most out of all this is to give the families a voice. We gave you a voice. We want you to know that you've been heard, and we want families to know that we are listening and doing everything we can to get all the other parties to listen to. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure. I'm really honored to be here and not only tell my story, but to really encourage other families to speak up, speak out, and bring solutions to the table. Some of these problems and questions are really, really difficult. And the more ideas and the more solutions without anger, without frustration, collaboration is really what we need in this new environment.
Exactly. If all we're doing is complaining, people's ears turn off. When we come in and we say, what if we tried? I bet, people are going to be way more open to that right now because they're going to have to try something. So thanks again. Until next time.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.